Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. It's time for another episode of the Lions Grid. Today's episode, of course, is going to be... Oops, I can see we have fantasy football focus there in the title. I did forget to change that. But we're actually going to be taking a look at the NFL Pick'em today. And Joe, here in a second, I'm going to reveal the updated standings. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. So overall, Joe, you improved to 19-13. I'm 22-10. Still have that 3-game lead, but we both went 11-5 this past week. Pretty respectable, a healthy 69% pick'em rate there. So not too terrible at all.
Yeah, I think week one I was 500 if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, 8-8. So you definitely swung the right direction here in week 3. So going to be interesting to see what happens this week. Obviously, we still do differ a little bit here in some of our picks. I want to say, let me just take a look here. I know it's 1, 2, 3. I want to say we're separated by 3 games, so a chance for you to either make up the ground or maybe a chance for me to distance myself. Who knows? Of course,
This
Joe.
was the same difference we had last week. And last week there was games that were on both sides that came out in each of ours favor. You know, there were some games you got wrong that were different. Mm-hmm. Some games I got right that were different, and somehow, it's ended up being the exact same record for week 2.
Yep,
But,
we picked different on 4 games last week, and we split it right down the middle, 2 for 2. Of course, I don't know why I went with Andy Dalton and the Bengals. I've said it on the show time and time again. Don't trust Andy Dalton. Don't trust Andy Dalton. And he did it to me again. So I'm done. Never again am I sticking my head out on the line for Andy Dalton and the Bengals. They're done. They're done. But as we mentioned yesterday, Joe, I'll toss it up here. Of course, one game this week has already been played, and that's not included in the ranking or the records we had there. Our Thursday night pick, Joe, the Tennessee Titans. Going old school, going to go Houston Oilers there for a second. 0-3 on Thursday nights, Joe. We'll get another shot here coming up in week 4, but so far our kryptonite has really been this Thursday night game.
Yeah, that's a damn shame because I play Madden, and in my Madden game they have this thing where you can get a player from Ultimate Kickoff that gets an overall rating boost each game that the team wins. Mm-hmm. So I have the left guard from Tennessee, and he won week 1, and then 2 back-to-back weeks he lost. The same thing, I got the Lions wide receiver, won 1 week, tied another. Hopefully he gets the win this week. But, I generally am rooting for the Titans now, along with the Lions, because I want to get that boost in overall for my football players on Madden.
Yeah, certainly helpful to get those players upgraded because it can be a little difficult when they have those low ratings. So anything that can help boost them up, I'm there with you. It's a good thing. So what we'll do is we'll quickly run through the picks for this week. Then, Joe, we'll touch on our games of the week because might as well just run through who we're taking in every game and then go back and highlight the 2 games we like, is particularly like this week. And then, of course, for tomorrow's episode, we will take a more in-depth dive into the Lions matchup against the Eagles. But let's take a look here at the rest of the games of the week. The first game up, the Dolphins and the Cowboys. No surprise here, Joe. We're both going with the Cowboys. Next up, the Bengals and the Bills, and staying away from the Bengals, both going Bills. Here is one of the 3 games where we differ coming up next, Joe. You are going with the Lions.
3 straight weeks in a row going with the Lions.
Going with the Lions. Yeah, holding in strong, but I can't not pick the Eagles here, but certainly a chance for the Lions. Both going with the Patriots at home over the Jets. Going with the Falcons, we both are. I almost went with the Colts, but then I remembered T.Y. Hilton and Marlon Mack are both questionable heading into that game, so I pulled back on that. Both going with the Vikings at home over the Raiders. This is going to be your game of the week, Joe, but it's going to be one of the games that's going to help decide the split here. I'm going with Baltimore on the road to Kansas City. You're going with the Chiefs at home. Going to be a good game. We'll talk about that more here in just a minute. Both going with the Packers at home over the struggling Broncos. With Cam Newton out, we're both going with the Cardinals at home against the Carolina Panthers. Both going with Tampa Bay at home against the Giants. Both going with Seattle at home against the Drew Breesless Saints. My game of the week here is the Texans and the Chargers, and we're split once again. I'm going with the away team, the Texans. You're taking the Chargers at home. Both going with the 49ers, who are on a 2-game winning streak against the Ben Roethlisberger-less Steelers. Both going with the Rams over the Browns on Sunday Night Football. And then on Monday Night Football, both going with the Bears over Washington. And Joe, I don't know if you noticed, but you did go all 4 NFC North teams this week, going for that sweep of the NFC North over the rest of the league.
Yeah, my thought is that the NFC North is the best division in football, most talent and most competitive. Plus, the matchups this week are favorable to every team in the NFC North besides the Lions. But I really think that the Lions have a good chance at stealing a game away from Philadelphia with all those injuries, and we'll touch more on that tomorrow. But, the NFC North is, in my opinion, the strongest division. And interesting enough, our 2 games of the week, yours that you chose and mine, we both have different thoughts on who's going to win those games. So I thought it was interesting that you decided to go with Baltimore, but I'll talk about more of that when we bring that back up. But, the NFC North's a strong division, and looking forward to, watching it progress throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I was, 3 or 4 with the NFC North myself, so we both think pretty highly of the NFC North. Maybe it's biased because we are Lions fans. It could be that. Of course, also I'm a big fan of the Packers, so it might just be bias. But I think the NFC North is certainly top to bottom one of the toughest divisions in the NFL, if not the toughest. There are some challengers out there. The NFC in general looks pretty stacked. You have a couple of teams in the NFC East, the NFC West, the NFC North. The South really is the only NFC division that's kind of lagging behind, and a big part of that is, Drew Brees getting hurt, Cam Newton getting hurt. So unfortunately, the South isn't there, but those other 3 divisions all looking tough. And Joe, let's go ahead and throw it into. I can see though. We'll pick up on my dad's comment here that the NFC North, in his opinion, is not the best division. But if not the NFC North, then who? Who is the best division? That's what I'm curious. So we'll wait to see how he responds. But let's take a look at your game of the week, Joe. As mentioned, Baltimore traveling to Arrowhead, not a friendly stadium to be heading into at all. Ravens got their work cut out. Of course, you're going with the home team, the Chiefs there. I like Baltimore. Tell us a little bit about why you chose this game as your game of the week.
Game of the week because I believe that both teams are similar. They have the Baltimore Ravens have a solid defense year in and year out. They've had explosive plays on offense from Lamar Jackson. Mm-hmm. And, Kansas City's defense is going to let up some points to Baltimore in that explosive offense. But I just think that Kansas City is just too powerful of an opponent, being Super Bowl favorites, having all the talent that they have, even though they're missing a few players. They really have, the league reigning MVP, and you always talk about how their defense isn't the greatest. I would say that you kind of underrate their defense in some terms, because although they do put up points, that they can still make plays. I know a lot of that goes into account when they played those Rams last year in that Monday Night Football game that was extremely high scoring. But, for some reason, I think that they're going to be able to have a good containment on Lamar Jackson, being that it is a game early on in the season as they're both undefeated teams. And it's really a statement game for both of these teams. I wouldn't be surprised if Baltimore came out and was able to win the game. But as far as who I think is going to win the game and play better football overall, I think I have to go with Kansas City at home because, in my opinion, they're the best team besides the Patriots in the AFC. Like I did in the rankings, power rankings earlier this week, Baltimore was number 4 or 5 as compared to Kansas City at number 2.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly I think Kansas City is the favorite heading into this game, and I think overall, they're certainly a solid team. Patrick Mahomes has looked like the best QB in the NFL so far. Obviously, Tom Brady is also playing at a high level for the Patriots, and I think overall the Patriots are the best team in the NFL. There's a reason why both you, me, and everyone else in the media has the Patriots as their number one in the power rankings. They've certainly earned it so far, but Kansas City is certainly up there towards the top of everyone's list as well. And the Ravens are sort of the new team on the block there. So this is certainly a chance for these two teams to sort of help shape what that power structure looks like in the AFC. I still do have, to your point, I do have some questions about the defense with Kansas City. I like Baltimore's defense better. It's hard to stop Kansas City's offense, but between those two defenses, if I had to put money on which team could actually come up with a defensive stop when they absolutely have to have it, I'd go with the Ravens defense. But there's also Eric Fisher being out, Tyreek Hill not being there. Their backfield's all banged up. So I think there's enough chinks in the armor of Kansas City where the Ravens can come in here. And if they play at the same level we've seen through the first 2 weeks, certainly can be successful. But then again, if you look at who the Ravens have played in the first 2 weeks, last week they played the Cardinals. The week before that, it was Miami. So yes, they're off to a hot start. Their opponent, this is by far going to be their biggest test of the season, and I think this is a really good selection for a game of the week, Joe, because these are two teams towards the top of the NFL power rankings. They're going to be going head to head here on Sunday. One thing that certainly goes against the Ravens is the fact that this game is at Arrowhead Stadium. It's one of the loudest stadiums in the NFL. Certainly a home field advantage there for Kansas City, but yeah, should be an exciting game. It's on at the 1 o'clock time slot, so certainly, unfortunately, playing at the same time as the Lions, but certainly if you have the NFL Red Zone, could be a game where you're seeing a lot of those offenses, because I could see this game becoming quite the shootout. Could be a big thing on the NFL Red Zone with touchdowns galore in this matchup between these two teams.
Yeah, you're going to see Baltimore want to try to come out and prove that they're a contender right away in the AFC by getting a win against Kansas City. But Kansas City is going to want to deflate all this hype about Baltimore this season. Last year, we got a glimpse of them making a playoff run, getting into the playoffs, and then being shut down. Kansas City would like to deflate them early on, so if they do end up meeting in the playoffs, that Kansas City already has that edge, knowing that we can beat them. It's a different story if you play a division rival in the playoffs, whether or not you go 2-0 or 1-1 or 0-2, and you still end up playing them in the playoffs, because that's two games that you get to know your opponent. The third game's all a question mark, and any team can win that no matter what the record is in the division. But these guys aren't in the division; they only get one game. So I think the game that you win between Kansas City and Baltimore is definitely more of a statement if you were to meet up later on in the postseason.
And certainly could help with the playoff rankings too. Obviously, I think it's pretty safe to say the Patriots will either be the number 1 or number 2 seed, likely the number 1 seed. So that means the Ravens and Kansas City, several weeks down the road, could be competing for the number 2 seed. And of course, the winner of this head-to-head matchup certainly should have an advantage if everything else is the same there between their records. So, it's only a week 3 game, but potentially, something that could impact these two teams beyond week 17, the outcome of this one. So should be a good game. Moving over to my game of the week, I have the Houston Texans, my preseason pick to be the AFC representatives in the Super Bowl, visiting the Los Angeles Chargers. Joe, obviously the Chargers coming off a loss last week to the Lions. They are at home, and they didn't play awful. They did make a couple of mistakes that the Lions were able to capitalize on and get the win there. The Texans last week did struggle a little bit there with Gardner Minshew and the Jaguars only winning that game 13-12 at home. Again, the Texans are a team I feel pretty good about. Obviously, they lost the first week against the Saints. Barely got out with a win against Jacksonville. They haven't played at a level that's consistently making me feel confident in them as my preseason Super Bowl pick. I'd like to see them step that up a little bit. And then the Chargers, a team that everyone, I think, thinks is at least a playoff contender. Certainly losing to the Lions last week could come back to haunt them, but it was their first. I think it's their first loss of the season. Let me double check the standings here real quick. Yep, that was their first loss. So, they won the first week pretty handedly. I like the Texans in this, just slightly over them. I think if you look back at how the Chargers lost that game to the Lions last week, again, turnovers were the big things there. There were also a bunch of big penalties that prevented a couple of what would have been touchdowns from going up on the scoreboard. And I think the Texans are too good of a team to have those same mistakes and get a win against. So unless the Chargers really clean that up heading into this game against the Texans. And this game, the good news is one of the later games on Sunday afternoon, starting at 4:25. I think these are both two teams that could represent the AFC in the playoffs, but I'm going with my Texans, my preseason Super Bowl pick, to go into I'm not even sure what the Chargers are using as a home field, if they're using the Coliseum still or what they're doing, but going in against the Chargers and getting that win on the road.
My thought about this game is that what we saw in week one from the Texans is late game field goal by the Saints to get a loss on the Texans record early on. Like you said, in week two, they played a Jacksonville team that came out and proved that they can play football and got a win against, the Titans here in week three already. So, the Jacksonville Jaguars are a competitive defensive football team, and I think that showed against the Texans when they were only able to win the game by a few points. So right now, both these teams come in at 1-1. I think they both have offense to prove. I don't think the question mark's on defense. I think they both want to prove that they can put up some more points than they did in week two. Definitely the Chargers feel like they missed out on a lot of points and a lot of opportunity to win that game and be 2-0. So I think they're going to come out fired up. And I just don't want to go with the Texans due to the sole fact that they haven't proven to me yet that they are an elite caliber team like you had in week one for the game of the week, between the Texans and the Saints. That was like an all, great game. All that game was great. And they had the lead for the majority of the game too. And that was like their best game that they've played this season. Granted, they lost it. They won their next one. You want to look for the consistency factor. And over the last few years, we've never had a consistent Texans team that's been, winning constantly.
Yeah.
I think what you see with the culture for the Chargers is a consecutive playoff appearance or, competitive win-loss record, winning record. So I think the culture and them being at home and wanting to prove that there's still a great team. I think the Chargers are going to be able to win this game. But I expect this to be a great game of the week and definitely a very competitive football game. I wouldn't be surprised if either team won, but I'm going with the Chargers.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a lot of great points there, Joe. Starting with just the consistency, I think maybe the Texans over the last few years might have had higher highs, but they've certainly had lower lows. So they're certainly, they're up all over the place, roller coasting it. And the Chargers certainly they haven't been great, but they've been good and consistent. So, I think from that perspective, certainly you can feel more confident going with the Chargers than the Texans because they've just, game in and game out year after year, they're pretty consistent, whereas you never really quite know what you're going to get with the Texans. Sometimes they're going to come out and play some games that are almost instant classics, like how they started off the season against the Saints, and then the next week you get the 13-12 ugly victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it might turn out as the season progresses that the Jaguars are just a really good team, that Gardner Minshew is so far through 2 weeks he looks pretty decent. It might just be that Jacksonville was much tougher than we give them credit for in week two, but certainly people waiting for them to take the next step, but they just haven't been able to do it yet. And then to the point about records, Both these teams 1-1. For the Texans, obviously they're going to be motivated to get a win because that would bump them up to 2-1 and a chance to take a solid lead in the AFC South. For the Chargers, they're chasing the Chiefs. That loss to the Lions definitely hurts them, and they got to keep pace. So they're going to be motivated to get a win as well. So I think it should be a pretty good game Sunday afternoon between these two teams. Well, that goes over our games of the week here, and just want to say hello to Kartik and thank you for tuning in all the way from Australia. Happy to have you here. Also thank Jeffrey and my father for tuning in. If you're catching this video after we've gone live, by all means, if you enjoyed it, please do help the channel grow. Hit that like button on the video, and if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's probably the best way you can help support us at the moment. We're working towards those 100 subscribers to get our custom URL for the channel, and we're making good progress, but we still need some help there. So please, if you can, consider going ahead and hitting that subscribe button, and you can also ring the bell to get notified when we go live tomorrow when we do our pregame episode, Joe, for the Lions and Philly, and we can sort of talk about the rift that we have here. You know, you going with the Lions, me going with Philly here in the Pick'em segment. We'll break down the reasons why tomorrow morning before the game kicks off.
One thing to quickly note before we end today, funny that we both choose AFC games. You know, both teams, or both games are between 4 teams in the AFC, and all 4 of them are, you know, playoff caliber teams.
Yep.
We were talking about how powerful the NFC North is, but I mean, not the NFC North, but the NFC in general. But, you know, to really get these matchups early on between these AFC contenders for playoff positions and divisions, besides New England, that's 5 teams right there that we all think are going to make the playoffs. So definitely some good choices for games of the week.
Yeah, and certainly if the Saints hadn't lost Drew Brees, that Saints-Seahawks matchup might have been a little more appetizing as a game of the week choice. It loses a little bit of its luster there with Drew Brees on the sideline. But, yeah, it just seems like overall this week the AFC had the more interesting matchups. There are quite a few games between AFC and NFC teams too. Of course, the Packers and the Vikings taking on the Raiders and the Broncos. So it's going to be interesting. I think we had some solid choices there. And yeah, to your point, I think we included some of the front runners there in the AFC. So it's going to be a very interesting Sunday to see how things play out, because it should help. It could help change the power rankings come next week, depending on the outcomes, and could help give us an early indication here at the start of this. Well, this is week 3, so after week 4, we'll officially be a quarter of the way through the season. So it'll give us a good idea of who's playing really well here in the first quarter of the 2019 season. All right. That'll do it for us today. Again, make sure if you're interested in learning more about why we're going with about the Lions and Eagles matchup, why Joe's going with the Lions and I'm going with the Eagles, make sure you do tune in tomorrow for that episode of the Lions Grid. Until then, I'm Kevin Marheine. He's Joe Wilmot. We'll see you during the next video.